Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. Today is February. What's the date today? The 7th, 2024. And today, Kelvin has come. We are so grateful that you're here. For Anna, who doesn't know Kelvin, we will tell you that he has been helping people navigate their lives more easily and smoothly for over 50 years. Throughout his life, he has focused on empowering others, and I can tell you exactly that is what he does. Often teaching them techniques and new ways of thinking, helping them to be more self sufficient and effective. He has taught meditation, the author of 3 books, and I want to get the titles right, so I will tell you they are Overcoming the Fear of Death, After the Afterlife, and Marcus Aurelius Updated. 3 books. And I posted them in the group so that you can buy them on Amazon if you choose to do that. What else can I tell them about you? His meditation technique, I will tell you, is priceless. It helps so much, and those of you who have done it already know and have met him. And we are just really grateful that you're here today to talk to us. And we had talked a little bit about what the content will be. And lately, people have been posting a lot about fear in the group. Fearful of this, fearful of that, fearful of what happens in the afterlife, fearful of what happened to their children. So I think we'll probably start with that. And I'll give it to you, Kelvin.
Yeah, thanks, Anne Marie. It's great to see everybody here again. Those of you who have seen me here before, those of you who have taken any of my classes before, and then the new folks here who haven't seen me before. Yeah, Anne Marie and I were talking. We thought maybe I'd start talking about this notion of fear as it relates to what I generally refer to as continued existence, after we biologically die and our existence continues. Sometimes people have fears about themselves or about their loved ones who have predeceased them or whatever. So we thought we'd talk about the fear first, and then we'll talk about what the afterlife is like, and then you can ask me questions and so forth, because the other part that I guess part of my bio is in addition to learning to meditate when I was 19 years old and been teaching it for 54 years now around the world. I also started spontaneously tapping into the other side, I guess you would call it, or they started contacting me, is what happened, literally, in 1986. Completely spontaneous. I didn't even believe in an afterlife. I didn't, never mind communicating with him. Why would I communicate with him if I don't believe in an afterlife? And I started getting communications from the other side, 1986. So whatever that is, almost 40 years, right? A long time ago. So it's very normal for me. I don't do medium work, although I did do it for about 6 months back in the 80s. That's not what I do. I'm not psychic. I'm psychic, but I'm not a psychic, if that makes sense. And many of you are probably psychic and have openings and have had experiences with the other side, and that means you're psychic. But you may not do it professionally or whatever. That's what I mean. I'm not a psychic. And my past life memory started opening up in 1977. Again, completely spontaneously, not believing in reincarnation. Used to make fun of people who talked about reincarnation. I just thought it was imagination, fantasy stuff, until I started having my own experiences. So that's a little background. But let's focus first on the fear part. So what is fear? Fear is the emotion caused by the anticipation of unhappiness. So we anticipate that something's going to make us unhappy, it's going to be unpleasant, and we don't want to go there. And so and it stirs up an emotion, and that's the emotion that we call fear. Okay? So as it relates to afterlife, or what I call continued existence, sometimes, how can we deal with that? Well, what most people do is they deal with it by reading a book or talking to a psychic or watching YouTube videos. In other words, all of that kind of stuff that is what I call content oriented. In other words, what can I learn from what somebody else's experience or what they've told me about what it's like? And so it's content. It's not experiential, is my point. It's not your experience, it's somebody else's experience. So to you, it's not experiential, it's just content. To them, it may be experiential, right? So we'll get into that after we talk about how to deal with the fear first, because I'll tell you about some of my experiences on the other side, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not that that's a waste of time. That does help to some degree. But I'm sure many of you have either talked to psychics or mediums or read books about afterlife, talked to other people who've had tragically, and my heart goes out to you, by the way. I say this all the time, every time I talk to you guys, for having lost a child. You know, I have 2 children. But even those of you who've lost a child and talked to somebody else who's lost a child who has maybe had an experience communicating with their child and you haven't, it's still not your experience, is my point. It's still content oriented. That's what I mean, right? It's somebody else's. And there's a certain amount of belief that goes along with that. And I'm not saying not to believe them, but it's not experiential. Your belief is not based on your own experience. That's all I'm saying. So that's helpful, but it doesn't get rid of your fears necessarily, does it? Even those of you who've had that experience, you've talked to other people, talked to psychics, saw YouTube videos, whatever, talked to friends even who've lost a child and as well, and they've had experiences, not your experience. You might still have fears and doubts, right? How do we deal with that? So the way I help people deal with that is by teaching meditation. That's one of the many reasons you could learn to meditate. It's not the only reason. You could learn to meditate just because you want to think more clearly. Or I teach professional athletes, not professional, some professional athletes and college athletes and anybody who's at, at high school, whatever, athletes who want to get back on the playing field. They're not doing it because they want to get rid of their fears about death and dying or about having lost a loved one. There's a huge range, is my point, of people who I teach. But let's talk about how to get rid of the fear of this continued existence or fear about having lost a loved one and wondering how they're doing, any kind of fear-related issue. The way I teach meditation is very different from the way most of you, unless some of you have taken my class, but most of you have taken other classes of meditation. What I teach is very, very different. No concentration, no focusing the mind, no controlling the mind, no trying to clear the mind of thoughts, no trying to quiet the mind. If those of you have dabbled in any other meditation techniques, they usually are talking about all or some of those issues. That's the techniques that they're looking for. Quiet the mind. That the techniques involve that. Focus the mind, right? Concentrate. Think more positively. All of those are what I call control or manipulation techniques. What I teach is the opposite of that. Because if you've ever tried to do that, it's those other techniques, they're very, very, very difficult, right? Because your mind wants to keep thinking about whatever it's thinking about. Especially if you've lost a loved one, what is your mind often thinking about? Hello, it's lost a loved one, and you're grieving and so forth, and you're going through a lot, all right? Controlling the mind in that situation is not only difficult, it's counterproductive. It doesn't work. It makes the mind go there more, where you don't want it to go. So it's like telling your mind not to think about something, and that's all you can think about, right? That's not what I do. So what I teach people to do is how to turn within. I call it turning within meditation. And in a very easy, increasingly effortless way, it becomes easier and easier and easier over time as you continue doing it. And your mind and your body and your emotions get used to not controlling. It gets easier and easier to the point where it becomes almost automatic. And those of you know what the fight or flight is, you've heard, and many of you have experienced, especially, I'm sure, immediately after, for sure, for maybe still after your child died, their fight or flight is triggering, right? All that cortisol, adrenaline, the heart's racing, all that stuff is going on biochemically. There's an equally natural and automatic opposite switch in the human nervous system that we're born with too, but most people don't know how to turn it on. I teach people how to turn that on, right? And when you learn how to turn that on, the whole process of healing and fear reduction, back to which is why we're talking about fear reduction happens, because fight or flight, that goes hand in hand with fear, right? The fight or flight response, the biochemical brain chemistry, the whole thing that goes along with fear. And so when you start balancing that out, fear reduces. The other thing that's going on is this analogy I came up with fairly recently, and I'll just kind of end with this last point. We can open up to questions and talk about, more content stuff. But in terms of the meditation, what I teach, this is how it's different from other techniques. It's kind of like our mind is like a big ocean liner with a big deck on it. That's our mind. So in this analogy, picture a big, huge ship with a deck on it, and the deck has 100 to 200 deck chairs. And the 100 to 200 deck chairs, those are like our thoughts and emotions, our feelings, our experiences. Those are the deck chairs, right? Most people's approach and most other meditation techniques approach is to try to change the deck chairs or rearrange the deck chairs, move them around and get rid of the broken deck chairs, the thoughts that are kind of not good thoughts, the negative thoughts, or the thought patterns that aren't really serving us. Get rid of those broken deck chairs in the analogy, okay? That's not what I do. What I teach you how to do is how to expand the size of the deck. That is your conscious capacity of your mind getting bigger. Your mind is huge. Each individual, each of us, every human being has a huge mind. But we're used to only operating using the mind that just picked this pen up. That's part of my mind. I focused, I look at a pen, I pick it up with my hand. That's part of my mind that's doing that, but it's a small part of my mind. We have all of this vastness of the human mind, the human consciousness that's not used. So what I teach people to do is how to turn the light switches on and the rest of that, and then we start using it more, fears go away because now you feel so much bigger, not so trapped in this little 8-inch bucket part of our mind, right? It's the focusing, the controlling part of our mind, where most of our daily thoughts are. And you start to experience the vastness of your mind, you feel freer. And more freedom starts to reduce fears, and they start to go away. And typically what my students tell me, and I've taught somewhere between 5, 6, 7,000 people around the world. I'm in 68 countries now. I teach on Zoom. Is they typically say they don't know when it went away. They don't know when their fears went away because you don't know what you're not noticing. And they just stop noticing it. So they don't know exactly when it happens, but eventually it goes away. But it's gradual. It's little by little by little by little over time. Right? And do the meditation about 10 to 15 minutes each time, twice a day. That's it. 10 to 15 minutes each time. Eyes closed. Can do it anywhere. Public place, private place, quiet, noisy, doesn't matter. All right. So that's kind of the overview in terms of the technique. But that's how we get rid of the fears related to continued existence or what's happened to our loved one. It's you still may be concerned about our loved ones. My mom died in 1982. I still miss her. The sadness is still there. But because my mind has expanded its conscious capacity so much, I am no longer overwhelmed by that grief as I was initially, the sadness. So you don't become a robot, but you become more in control of your life because there's so much more to your mind, you realize, and therefore you're not so easily consumed by emotions, experience, et cetera, et cetera. Hope that makes sense, right? Yeah. So let's talk about what happens after we die. So I'm going to just say some general principles and then we'll open up the questions because I want to hear what you guys want to know about, okay? Because it's such a broad topic. as I said, my experiences started when beings started communicating with me from the other side. It was angels, it was archangels, it was beings I didn't know, it was human beings who had died on the other side and were on the other side, didn't know. And then it was some people, beings that, and eventually beings I did know, human beings who I knew in 20th century Earth, 21st century, my lifetime. Um, Bottom line is, when the biology shuts off, our biological body dies, our mind continues. And you can call it mind, soul, spirit, consciousness, awareness. To me, I use those interchangeably. They're all synonymous as far as I'm concerned. And when we go to the other side, we never die alone. This is a point I know that some parents have this concern, especially if it was a young child who goes and dies to the goes to the other side, transitions to the other side, biologically dies. Naturally, a parent would be worried, are they alone? You know, who's going to guide them, etc. So the bottom line is, whenever anybody dies, they never die alone. They're always, you may not see the beings in the room, whether they died at home or in the hospital or wherever, or in an accident or wherever. You wouldn't necessarily see. Sometimes people can see, because some of you may have the ability to see into the other side to some degree. But even when you don't see them, they're there. And some people, we can see the other beings. And what I've seen, and here's the other thing. I don't have to have a near-death experience to be on the other side, to go to the other side. I have the ability to just go to the other side and not lose my biological body, still functioning. So I've seen, and some people have seen, you can see that they're like, I call them, they're like greeting parties. It's like a big group of people who greet the dead person, the transitioning person, soul, when they go to the other side. So your child is greeted by many beings, many other people, some dead humans, and some not humans, angels and others who've never been humans. That's how I define angels, anyway. Um, some people might think of their dead grandmother, as an angel. That's a very broad way of defining angel, and that's okay too. But when I say angel, I mean beings who've never been incarnate in a physical biological body before. So they're all it's a mix of those, and some they know, your child would know from this lifetime, maybe their dead grandmother, dead great-great-grandmother, maybe your great-great-great-grandmother never met the child, but they've seen the child grow and be born on this side, and so they know there's a connection there. And those are the biological DNA genetic connections. Then there are the non-biological connections. What does that mean? It's like, I think I can say this publicly since you said it at the beginning, Anne Marie, but you and Anna have a connection from another lifetime. My guess is that, I don't know this for sure, but that you're not biologically, genetically connected this lifetime. Is that correct? Right. You're not biologically, genetically connected this lifetime, and yet you have this connection from another lifetime. That's what I'm talking about. So there's other beings that we may have connections with, may have been family even with, who are on the other side, who also greet us. That includes your children. So that would be your genetic, biological families from the recent lifetime and others. So it's a big, huge welcoming party, really. And then there are what I call counselors. This is just Kelvin Chin. You kind of probably already gathered from me. I'm kind of informal the way I talk about stuff. So they're like counselors, who are there, who may not have known your child at any point, but they're there kind of as transition counselors to help guide the soul into being on the other side, because it's different from here. It's very similar, but it's different. Similar in what way? Similar in the way that we still have a mind and we don't forget who we are and we can still communicate, etc. But it's mental telepathy communicating. It's not, we don't have vocal cords. We don't have a biological body, obviously. So it's very different in that respect. But it's similar in the sense that our mind continues and we recognize other beings. We have what I call an identifiable energy pattern. That's the phrase that I use. We have an identifiable energy pattern, meaning we can recognize who other people are or beings are. If we've seen them before, we can recognize them. And yet we don't have a biological form. So that's why you hear me use the phrase when our biological body dies. I now say biological as opposed to our body dying, because we still have a body on the other side. It's just not biological. It's a light body. It's an energy body that can be seen and identified by other beings on the other side. So the other side is very different from here. And so there's an acclimation, a transitioning, and a getting used to period, so to speak, that these beings that I call counselors kind of help the newly biologically dead person adjust, basically. Right? So questions? That's kind of general. We can get into all kinds of specifics. You want to ask me stuff, right?
Does anybody have a question?
You just speak up.
Yeah, just unmute yourself and speak. I know you guys have questions.
Okay.
Hey, Karen.
I don't know if they're questions though, so bear with me. I just wrote a bunch of things down that I want to know
Okay.
about, but I won't take up the time.
When you guys see me writing, like with Karen or whoever else, I throw away my notes afterwards, but I am writing this down to so that when you say something, Karen, I don't want to interrupt you. I'm writing out, oh, I want to talk about this. Oh, she said this. I want to talk about that. That's when I'm scribbling notes to myself. And by the way, we're recording this. I think people know that. And if you want to be anonymous, you can just turn your camera off because might put this on my YouTube channel. So we just want to let people know you can turn your camera off and just have your name. And you also know how to change your name. You could put an anonymous name there. You know those three dots in the top right corner of your, if you scroll over on your particular little square, you click on that and it says rename. You can put Elvis Presley or Olivia Newton-John or whatever name you want to put there. Yeah, if you really want to be anonymous. So there you go. Karen, yes.
Okay. Gosh, you said so many things that were interesting to me, just about the biological body and the light body on the other side. I'm curious about, I mean, my ultimate goal is to connect with my son.
Yeah.
But I don't have any special abilities. I didn't grow up that way. So I feel like it's work that I have to do, which I'm willing to do, but I like meditation. I actually like guided meditation. For me, I heard you say it's counterproductive, and maybe it is for my ultimate goal, but I'm I never meditated before in my life. So just the idea of being guided and in thinking, I'm okay with even my thoughts, being in different directions. I do like guided meditation for like Reiki and maybe just more than just because I'm grieving. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, like, because I think I've heard you say that before. So I don't want to do anything counterproductive, honestly,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
connecting with my son.
I'll answer that. It's a really good point, and I need to refine my comment on that. So go ahead. It's good that you raised that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, okay, but like I said, I don't want to do anything that's counterproductive to my ultimate goal of being able to connect with my son. So if I am,
It's not counterproductive in that way.
okay.
So let me talk, I'll come back and anything else though, besides those two issues?
Oh, well, that, I also, yeah, I mean, things like what does the veil look like? I hear the word veil, but I can't even envision what that would look like, how to get, how to see past the veil. So those are the things. I'm a very, I think, visual person, and so I'm always looking for something visual, but I realize that it's not.
Yeah. All right, and you can come back. We can come back to you if you have other questions too. So let me just answer some of these. So
Okay.
the easy one is, what does the veil look like? The veil is just a phrase. So it's not a thing per se. It's just a phrase people use because for most people there is some barrier of some sort in terms of our experience here on planet Earth versus experience in heaven or the afterlife or whatever we want to, however we want to label that. So that's all that means. And veil is used as opposed to barrier because some people can pierce the veil. They can get through it, and it's more cloudy-ish. So the idea of a veil, V-E-I-L, a veil you put over your head typically or whatever, you can kind of see through the veil usually, right? But it's not.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
ever these old hat? I don't know. My mom had them in the 1950s. Right? The hats with the veil coming down, like a little
Right.
gauzy kind of part. You can see through it, right? But you can kind
Okay. Yeah.
of, that's the idea. So it's not that you're necessarily seeing a thing. It's just an expression. That's all that is, right? And for
Okay.
some people, the veil doesn't exist really much at all, right? So that's why. Um, in terms of I'm really glad you mentioned this. So when I say counterproductive to what? So it's not counterproductive to what your goal is in terms of, and it doesn't mean that a guided meditation or any other kind of form of meditation is not helpful. I'm not a believer in black and white absolutes. Okay, anything that somebody is doing can be helpful. That's the thing, right? But if one really wants to turn on an automatic switch that's, for example, opposite, as I said, to the fight or flight switch, which is automatic, we know that you're not sitting around going, oh, am I got to turn my fight or flight on now because I'm sad and I'm grieving. It just automatically floods you. And all of a sudden you're sad and grieving. You're not deciding to turn on your fight or flight. It's an automatic switch. Well, this equally automatic switch, this is the opposite of the fight or flight. In medical terminology, those of you know any medical terms, it's called the parasympathetic nervous system. But I just, layperson language, I just call it the opposite of the fight or flight. There's an opposite switch that exists, and we're born with it, but most people don't know how to turn it on. So, but it's an automatic switch. So does it make sense logically to control the mind to turn on something that's automatic in it? No. That's otherwise it wouldn't be automatic, right? Controlling something to controlling to turn on an automatic switch makes no logical sense. So in that sense, that's what I meant when I say it's counterproductive. Okay, it's counterproductive to the desire to turn on something automatic to control it, if that makes sense. Okay.
Okay.
Now, right. But is guided meditation helpful? Is the different meditation techniques helpful, even if they are controlling to some degree? Yeah, it's helpful. It's helpful. So there's nothing wrong with it. So that's why I'm saying I'm not making this absolute statement about, but the counterproductive referred to this controlling versus automatic issue, right? Turning on an automatic switch. Now, back to your goal of connecting with your son you mentioned. I want to talk about that because I'm glad you mentioned that, because many of the students I have through this group and other groups who've lost children and or loved ones, spouses, brothers, sisters, doesn't matter, but many of the people who come to me who have lost a loved one come to me because they want to connect with them. And so let's talk a little bit about that. So what's the best way to connect with somebody who is on the other side of this veil that we're talking about, in heaven? Is to expand our conscious capacity of our mind, because if our mind is more powerful, that's what we're going to communicate with them through. We're obviously not connecting with them from a biological standpoint, because they don't have a biology. We do, right? So how are we connecting with them? Obviously through our mind, our soul, our consciousness, right? So what can we do to strengthen our side?
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Expand our conscious capacity. So I cannot guarantee that that's going to happen in every individual I teach and work with, but that is very often a goal. And that you just logically think about it, does it make sense? And yes, expanding our own capacity so that our mind is more consciously aware, woken up, so to speak. We're using more of our mind. Can we touch other beings more easily who are non-biological? Yes. Does that make sense?
Yes. When you said strengthen, that helped me
Yeah.
kind of,
So
yeah.
it's all relative. When I said counterproductive, I did not mean black and white. So this is all relative. How can we strengthen ourselves more? And so meditation is one important aspect, I would say. Eating well, taking care of our biology, because you and I still have biologies. We're staying healthy, and it affects our mind. Our mind and our mind or soul and our bodies are separate and distinct from each other, but they affect each other. So obvious things like, exercising, hydrating, drinking lots of water, doing everything that we know we should do to keep our body healthy and strong will also increase the probability, the likelihood. It's all probabilities, really. It's really all likely. What can we do to increase the chances, in other words, of connecting with your son, right? All of these things kind of go together. The key word in life is balance. So what can we do to balance all of those different elements that increases that likelihood you can connect with your son, right?
Okay.
Make sense?
It does. It does.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good stuff, though. Good questions. Yeah, good points. Yeah. Helpful for a lot of people, I think. Other
Great.
questions?
Anybody else have a question?
You had something from somebody who wrote something in.
I did. I had a couple actually.
Mm.
One was, why do we forget everything when we come to this side? Why don't we remember
Mm.
the other side? Why don't we remember all of our experiences and our incarnations?
Right. Why do we forget so much?
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, depends on the person. So it's the classic lawyer answer. It depends. Those any lawyers here, you'll chuckle at that. So it's like, it depends on the situation, depends on the individual, et cetera, et cetera. But there are some general reasons we'll talk about, I think. This is my conjecture, Kelvin Chin conjecture. Because most people don't remember what it's like on the other side, and they don't remember making choices to come into this lifetime, et cetera, et cetera. Even though they may have, and they may not have too. Does everybody always make choices of who their family's going to be? Not necessarily. Some people do, and some people don't. There's no absolutes about any of these things that you hear people talk about spiritually on the other side. There are general principles, and you'll hear like common themes from a lot of people, but there's no absolute, everybody always if you ever hear anybody say everybody always, it's like, yeah, no, there's always little exceptions here and there because people are different. But for the most part, you're right. People tend to not remember. And so I think a lot of that is fear based and it's embarrassment based. And I mean that in a very nitty gritty, real way. Just people are embarrassed by uh, by you know what they may have wanted to come in because some people just decided they just wanted to come in to get drunk, and that may not be something that they want to remember to broadcast to other people, and their subconscious just parks it. And so it's like, yeah, that was the reason you came here. I mean, if you look around uh, in your life, not just people you know, but people you don't know, and how many people are very strategic about how they think about things? You know, not a lot of people. Not people don't do a lot of planning of their lives. So when you hear people talking about soul plans on the other side, yeah, it's possible, and I've done it. And I talk about in this book, I talk about some of the soul plans that I remember in my that's my third book about my past life memories. Um, but not everybody does. I think it could be like I have one of my students. I tell her, I said, um, you love ice cream. You might have come in for just for the ice cream, the soft serve ice cream. You missed that because biologically, mentally, you remember what the experience was like, but biologically, you can't taste it. You don't have that same experience because you have a light body on the other side. I mean, there are some very tactile experiences that people miss when they're on the other side. And and we've all experienced challenges living on this side. We have to put a roof over our head. We have to get a thing called a job because we got to make the stuff we call money. And it's can be very challenging on this side. We get to the other side, people are like, well, why wouldn't you just stay on the other side? And a lot of people do just stay. They don't come back. And very often. And there's nothing that says you have to come back, but they just hang on the other side. But very often people will get bored after a while. It's like how long can you be on vacation? And have whatever you want whenever you want it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it may sound like bliss in a certain respect, but after a while you decide, well, I'll come back, and you forget. I think another reason why we forget is because it's really important to be in the present. And I think for some people, remembering everything that happened to them on the other side would take them away from living here in the present moment. Right? For those people who really have, in a sense, I'll use this word loosely, have trained themselves over many lifetimes to be living in the present here on planet Earth and enjoying it and dealing with the challenges. And those of you who know anything about my life, I've been through some serious challenges this 21st century life as Kelvin Chin. Forget about my past life memories. I've been through challenges, but those of us here on planet Earth who have figured out how to navigate this and enjoy it, as challenging as it can be, and therefore live in the moment, have an easier time accessing past life stuff. This is a conjecture on my part. This is a theory that I have, okay? Right? But if we're always wishing we were elsewhere or wishing our life was different, I think that not living in the moment and not accepting our current reality interferes with memories. And that's what we're talking about here is memories, right? So it doesn't matter if it's a memory of before this lifetime or a memory of your childhood. Some people have a very difficult time remembering childhood stuff in this one lifetime. Their memory only goes back so far. And sometimes and I think the reasons are very similar. It could be a traumatic event that made them kind of shut down and not want to go back before that traumatic event. Or it may be embarrassment, or maybe fears. It could be a lot of different things. And I think it's very similar. to our memories before this lifetime. All right. But I think there's a certain self-regulatory thing is what I was kind of getting at, or also that helps us be here in the moment on planet Earth without being distracted almost by all of that stuff that was going on before here. So that's a more neutral kind of reason, right? It's not a negative reason. It's just a reason I think that helps us be more focused here until we can have our own individual openings and memories of that. All right.
Yeah, that's great. So I'm thinking you must be psychic because you answered Marlene's question about do we come and choose our parents before we get here?
And I think some people do.
Address that.
I think some people do and some people don't.
Yeah. She was wondering that.
Yeah. I think some people do, some people don't. And some of us may go, including myself, this guy right here, may go like, what? Why did I pick that guy to be my father? For those of you who know anything, you've heard me tell stories about my relationship with my dad. It was like oil and water, you know? It was like yelling and screaming. Let's just leave it at that, okay? And until I stopped trying to change him into somebody that I thought was more flexible and more emotionally intelligent. As soon as I stopped trying to change him into that which he was never going to become, our relationship improved. But it was because of me, right? So, but back to the question, I even thought I thought that myself. It's like, why I chose my parents, this guy? But in my case, I realized I had this, one of these light bulbs went on in my head, my mind, that I picked this family in particular because of my mom. And I talk about this in my third book, my After the Afterlife book. I talked about why I picked my mom. And my mom and I have had at least one very, very powerful, close relationship that I remember. And she just happened to be married to this guy who happened to be my father this lifetime. So if I wanted to have a relationship again with my mom, that's the guy who was going to be my dad. So, it's not always, perfect the way sometimes you hear people talk about. It was a choice that I made, right? And it was a choice that she made, obviously, before I was born, of who she married and who became, who, fathered the, the baby that became me. So,
right.
So that was out of my control. So that's the thing. It's another good example of how you may make certain choices for certain reasons, but other stuff within that, we'll call that family, so, the family choice here, choice of parents, is out of your control. And then you just live with it.
Yeah, I understand that completely because I think I came to be with my dad. I would have probably not chosen my mom in this lifetime.
Yeah.
Well, I get it.
Yeah.
And also you started to talk about something that was part of Olga's question. Olga, what was your question again? Because he started addressing it.
Yes, he did. My question is, and I think that we've kind of touched the subject in other events, but do we get a choice to come back right away or not come back at all? What do you think of that?
Oh, the short answer is that's a pretty easy one. The short answer is yes to both. In other words, you can come back or not come back. You can come back right away. You can come back not right away. You can hang out for 100 or 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 years on the other side, Earth years. Time is experienced different on the other side. We'll come back and talk about time in a minute, okay? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding about this idea of time. But you can hang out on the other side as long as you want. Is the point.
But do you think that if we decide, like I decide to come back right away and I can bring my daughter with me?
Yeah.
Or she would have to decide that on her own?
Well, of course she's going to have to decide that on her own. But if you go to the other side, you're going to see her right away, Olga, and you're going to be having that conversation and you're going to be trying to persuade her. She's still going to have to agree with you or not. In other words, she's still making her own decision about that. But how is that any different from when she was biologically alive with you on this side and you were talking about, I don't know, whatever you were talking about and trying to get her to agree with you about? X, Y, or Z, fill in the blank, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's the same thing on the other side. So, but yeah, come back immediately together.
Yeah, she didn't ask me if I wanted her to leave. So
Well, yeah, and well, that's a whole other thing about wanting to leave or not wanting to leave. Those are not desire. Those sometimes are desires. Depends on the child, depends on the person, the loved one who we're talking about.
yeah, she decided
She may
needed
have
to move.
decided.
She moved, you know, but
She what? Sorry.
she died by suicide.
Okay, so she did decide. Yeah, as
Yeah.
opposed to somebody murdering her, there's not a decision that that soul is making. So I've heard sometimes in some of these groups, people say, "Oh, everybody always decides their exit point." No, they
Mhm.
don't. Nobody don't. Nobody's deciding that the murderer of the person horrifically made a choice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that they live with that. They bear that responsibility. The consequences to their action. It has nothing to do with the person who was killed. Or illness, biological disease, illness, whatever. That's not something that somebody chooses. Oh, I want to get sick and I'm going to exit. Is it possible that somebody could choose that? Yes, it is possible. But it is not, this goes to the point that I said that there are no always absolutes, it applies to everyone all the time rules. There are no such thing like that. People like to make these things up because they think it makes people feel good. Well, I try to help people feel good by having them understand what's reality and what's actually accurate and what is what actually happened. And so sometimes there's choices made in your case, tragically, by your daughter. Other cases, not so much. There's a lot of varying. But back to your question, Olga, about when you can come back. I mean, there are examples of children. There are many examples of children who are, let's say, 2, 3 years old, and they die for whatever reason, illness, accident, who knows what. And that child, before they died, biologically had a scar on their arm or their leg or wherever. Maybe they fell riding their bicycle. Let's just make something up, but this has happened to somebody, but I'm just using this in this teaching example. They scarred themselves and they die. The child dies, 2, 3 years old. And then 9 months later, so that young couple, pregnant again, 9 months later, the mom gives birth to a child who has a birthmark, exact same place on that arm or the leg or wherever, and the exact same shape as the scar that the child had. Mm-hmm. Moreover, and more importantly, and this goes to some of the things that I talk about in this book, key takeaway in this book is not just the past life stuff, it's the personality continuing issue. So not only that, but the newborn baby has the exact same scar. It's a birthmark, same place, same shape, exactly the same, and the same likes and dislikes. Likes the same Disney movies, hates the same movies, likes the same food, hates broccoli, whatever, just like the child who just died, 9 months, a year earlier or whatever. So there's many examples like that, which to me, again, is any of this stuff absolute proof that you can put into an algebraic formula and have a right and a wrong answer? No, but it's pretty good evidence, pretty reliable that's pretty likely the same child. And how would they know And when they start speaking, you hear them start talking about stuff that they used to do when they were in their other lifetime. So now they're 5 years old, talking about memories that they had with the same family. Where does that come from? You know, that's pretty reliable evidence. So it could be that quickly, or it could be hundreds and thousands of years, and they go, whatever, you know? There's nobody there. Let me say it to you this way, because you hear a lot of this in spiritual groups. Oh, you got to come back and learn your lesson. You got to come back and work out that relationship. You got to come back because of this reason, because you hurt this person. So now you have this karmic debt to them, and now you got to come back and you got to pay them back and all this. No, you don't. You can choose to come back and work stuff out with somebody, but there's no being or no panel of judges, and there's no inanimate cosmic accounting system that's keeping track of this stuff, that's saying that making you go back, some energy form that's pushing you back. No, you're the energy form that's making yourself come back, only if you want to. And if you want to come back and work stuff out, like I have in different times, great. And other times you come back and you see somebody and you might recognize somebody, you may not recognize them, but if you do recognize them from another lifetime, you go, I got to avoid that person again. And you can do that. There's nothing that says that you have to do anything other than what you choose to do. And why would you choose to work things out? You choose it because you think that it's going to help you relationally and help you be a happier human being that subsequent lifetime. That's why you would do it, but nobody's making you do it. You know, there's this what I call a school marm belief system that's promoted. Do you know, guys, you ever heard that term school marm? Do you know what that means? School marm, it's like it's an old term that refers to, I don't know if it's from the 1800s in England or whatever, but wherever it's from, it's like a school teacher who's like, now, children, sit down, now do this, you got to do this, and you got to cross your hands, don't cross your feet, you put your feet down flat. You know, it's like telling you what to do all the time. A school marm. It's that kind of teacher, if you've ever had a teacher like that. And but there's a very much of a school marmish kind of approach to many angels, is my experience on the other side. Not all of them, but there's a lot of them who are, I swear that some of them were probably incarnate, you know, or it could be dead humans who are now in a light body form who you may mistake to be angels, but whatever, who are like, who like doing that. And there are many angels who like doing that, who've never been in a human form before, and they like telling people what to do. And so, it's like this personality trait that they have on the other side. And to me, it's like, yeah, I hang out with people like that. I've seen many, many beings like that on the other side. And they find me boring because I don't want to, I want to do my own thing in my own way. And so they just kind of leave me alone. So one of my lessons that I teach my students is that you have choice all the time, including on the other side. So if you want to join some group who has that kind of mentality that's led by one of these, what I'm calling jokingly, but a school marmish kind of person, that's okay, but that's your choice. Nobody's making you do it. You do it because, for whatever reasons, you know, you can do that. I'm not judging it. I'm just saying you always have a choice.
Okay, thank you.
So when we go to the other side, does that mean we remember our relatives from this life when we go to the other side? Or
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You remember your relatives, you remember your friends and your frenemies, your enemies, or whatever you want to call them.
Hey.
You remember everybody on the other side. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I call it. You have they are an identifiable energy pattern. It's kind of like, I don't know if people know what on an airplane, they all have, you know, not just commercial jets, but every plane could be single engine. It could be a big, huge jet, you know, commercial jet. You know, it could be a FedEx. You know, just a freight transport plane, Air Force. They all have transponders. A transponder is an electronic device that sends out a signal that's recognized by radar anywhere you are in the world. And it shows each transponder is unique to that plane. and it shows up on a radar screen on any airport or any naval vessel or whoever has a radar, it'll show up and it has the identification number on the radar. So you know whose plane that is and what plane that is. That's like kind of what we have when we die. Everybody's got a transponder. I call it identifiable energy pattern. It's identifiable. I'm not saying it's a number, but it's like shows up on a radar screen, actual for planes. But it's identifiable. So you remember them all and you recognize them all. Yeah. And the ones you don't, people will ask me sometimes, like, seriously, I've had some of my clients, they have abusive father or mother, abusive somebody, and they don't want to see him anymore. And I said, yeah, you don't have to, because on the other side, you have choice. Nobody's forcing you to be with anybody. And not only that, but you don't have a biological body, so you don't have to get in a car. You don't have to get in an airplane or a bus or a train. You don't have to get on a bicycle. You just think, I'm out of here. And you're out of there because it's your mind. Your mind manifests whatever it's thinking on the other side. Yeah.
That's
So
good to know.
you can escape really fast people you don't want to be with.
Oh, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Rangina, she said she had an aha moment. She
I
knew
saw that. What
Did you
was
see
that?
She
Yeah,
would
go ahead.
not have chosen her mom, but she probably came because she chose her father and her paternal grandmother.
There you go. Yeah,
So that was
exactly.
an aha moment.
Exactly. So these are good little lessons, I think, to take and park in the back of your mind so that when you are on the other side, we have more memory of what we can do, and we are more strategic in the selection of our parents, to use that example, or more strategic about anything, about coming back and hanging out with a certain group of friends. And so, like, Olga and her daughter get together on the other side after Olga dies biologically, and now she's with her daughter on the other side. You may get together with another 15 or 20 people, Olga, on the other side. And you say, hey, let's all go down and do a whole bunch of stuff together, and let's be a family together. Like a whole cousins and nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters, and let's just kind of like hang out and do, or maybe just friends, or whatever. You can have all kinds of different relationships, but you can plan it out on the other side, right? And I've done that a few times that I remember. I've probably done it a lot more times I don't remember, but there's a few times that I really do remember. And so I encourage people to do that, because what's more fun to do than to hang out with people you already know you resonate with, right? Spend all this time figuring out who your friends are and who the real friends are, quote unquote, the real ones, not the fake ones. And, use that, transport that into another lifetime. Take that with you, in other words. So let's talk briefly about this time experience. So often you'll hear some people say, oh, there's no time on the other side. Time doesn't exist. Yes, it does. Because people don't understand what time. And you'll hear these very, like some of these spiritual teachers have 1 million, 2, 3, 5, 10 million followers. And they're saying stuff like this. And I go, oh God, it's like, so time is a measurement of change. That's what time is. So when you hear people say time doesn't exist on the other side, they're typically referring to the fact that time can be experienced in very many different ways. That can happen in this side, doesn't it? Can it? Can't time be subjectively experienced in different ways? Have you ever been on vacation and time just flew by? Eh? Or have you ever been? The example I always remember is sitting in study hall in high school at 5 minutes of 3, waiting for the 5 minutes for the bell to ring so you can get the heck out of high school, go do what you really want to do. You're sitting there in study hall, nobody is studying, they're just sitting there with their books all piled up on their desk, just sitting there like, okay, looking at the clock. That last 5 minutes feels like the last 5 hours sometimes. That doesn't mean that time didn't exist in study hall. And it doesn't mean that time didn't exist when you were in vacation in Hawaii. Time still existed. Change was still happening. Time is a measurement of change. Does change happen on the other side? Yes. How do you know that change is happening on the other side? Because individuality exists. As long as there's individuality, in other words, it's not just big cosmic soup. You don't merge. You hear this phrase sometimes, people say, when you die, you merge with God. Well, or merge with the universe, or merge with the absolute is a Sanskrit translation of a Sanskrit term, merging with the absolute. This merging idea makes no sense. If you merged with God or the universe or whatever, you can't think, you don't have any memory. You just merge means lose one's individuality. It doesn't mean connect with God. Connection is not the same as merging. So that's a very fundamental, we got to use English correctly, especially in spiritual stuff. You got to use English correctly, otherwise it takes you down a really wrong road, and then you start developing all these belief systems that are incorrect. Connection and genuine feeling connection with God or the universe or everything animate and inanimate. I've had that experience thousands of times in my life this time, on this side. Forget about dying and having the experience. It doesn't mean that I'm merged. I still have a body and I can have that experience. It's the same thing on the other side. Connection is not the same thing. Merging means lose one's self, lose one's individuality. And I've heard psychics at conferences, and I've never gone up to them because I wouldn't embarrass them. I'm very respectful. But I've spoken at conferences where I've seen a psychic who charges $400, $500, $600 an hour, and for psychic readings, stand up there and say, when we die, we merge with fill in the blank. Really? You're a psychic. Who are you talking to? If everybody's merging and you're claiming to talk to the dead loved one of somebody, that's an individual mind you're connecting and talking with. There is no such thing then. It makes no logical sense, you see. And therefore, if there's individuality, there's change. If change exists, you can measure it. Time exists. Now, what about the measurement of time on the other side? I think it's very different from this side, the measurement of time. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So that's another point of confusion. People will take that and they'll what's called conflation. They'll take a fact that's accurate and they'll make it something that's inaccurate. So they'll say, well, time is experienced very differently on the other side. That's accurate. But then they'll say, that's why time doesn't exist on it. No. Change exists. You can measure it. Is it measured differently? Yes. That doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Look, 2,000 years ago in ancient Rome, did you know that we measured time differently in ancient Rome? There were 10 months in a year in ancient Rome. 10 months. How many are now? Humanity is now 2,000 years later. I don't know when we changed this, but we've decided that it's 12 months in a year. Does that mean that time didn't exist in ancient Rome? No, obviously time still existed. Change still existed. It was measured differently. The fact that time is measured differently on the other side doesn't mean it doesn't exist, okay? And so one way I've taught my students to think about this, I've given them an example and I said, like, for example, on the other side, we're an energy body, right? We've already agreed we don't have a biological body, but we have an energy body where our mind, our soul is energy. What can we measure on this side that's energy? Light. Light is energy. And we know what the speed of light is on this side of the veil. It's around 692 million something miles per hour. Let's round that off. 700 million miles per hour. That's the speed of light on this side. Imagine you die and now you're an energy body. I don't know if you can go 700 million miles per hour as a soul on the other side, but you can go really fast. I know that's the case because in my communication with beings on the other side, I've had, without all the details, I've had experiences where they've come and gone really fast. But let's say you can go 700 million miles per hour on the other side, the speed of light, because you're energy. That's incredibly fast if you can't figure that out. 700 million miles per hour. That's like around the fattest part of the Earth, the equator, 8 times in 1 second. That's how fast. 1 second, you just went around. In the sentence I just said that, you probably went around the Earth 24 times. You know, whatever, like crazy fast. So if you're an energy body, what I call it, not a biological body, but an energy body on the other side that's identifiable and can move that fast, you can get around the universe really pretty fast, right?
Denise, did you want to ask your question? I know that you typed out a couple.
Oh, okay.
Denise?
Sorry, am I unmuted now?
Yep,
You
we
are.
can hear you. We can hear you, yes.
Okay. One thing that I do question is that, I told that we come here with like a sole purpose and we choose that purpose, but yet when we're born, we lose what we're thinking, why we came here for in the beginning. And I guess my fear is that when it is my time to come, because I'm not scared of death. I embrace it. Like I'm not scared at all. I
Mhm.
I don't want to say I look forward to it, but like I'm not scared.
Mhm.
Because of what's there on the other side.
Mhm.
But the thing that crosses in my head is like, what if they're already on to their next I don't want to say challenge, but like uh that's the only thing I can think of like word wise right now. But are the, will their energy still be there? Like you go there with thinking that you're going to be there with your past loved ones, welcoming arms and everyone's going to be with you. But then there's that thing where we all choose to come back and into another life and we do this or we do that. And so for me, it's kind of hard to wrap my mind around that. I don't know if I'm saying it right, if it makes any sense, but
Yeah, I'll ask you some questions, but keep going.
like, okay, well, I'll use my son just, for example, since we're on Voices of Angels, but
Yeah.
yeah. So say my son was here and he chose me to be his mom and he went through the things that he went through and there's a purpose and whatsoever. So when I pass, if I go and I'm like, is he still gonna be there? Like he wouldn't be on to his next life, like another I don't want to say challenge, but that's the only thing I can think of when I say to it.
Yeah, that's okay. You can use that word. I understand what you mean, but yeah. So here's the thing. The short answer, I'll work backwards here with the different stuff that I wrote down about your question. So will he still be there? That's up to him. That's up to him, depending on what he wants and chooses to do. Could he have come back for some reason before you biologically die? Sure. That's completely up to him. So you won't know till you know when you get there. Now, could you be communicating with him now and saying, "Hey, honey, wait for me at least." So, wait for me for another 20 years on Earth years or whatever. And then, and because I want to see you when I come back. Sure, you guys could all be communicating with your dead loved ones in that way. They can hear you. So, I mean, that's what I would be doing. And then my experience of time on the other side is that his experience, your son's experience, let me just use it. I mean, I'm making up numbers here, Denise. Like, these are just for teaching example, okay? So
No, I understand.
don't hold me to this number, but let's
No.
let's say Denise, you're here on planet Earth for another 20 years. Let's just use a round number, okay? And so you say to him, look, I want you to hang out there, wait for me until I, complete living my whole life, and wait for me because I want to see you on the other side. 20 years, let's just say Earth years for you, Denise, it might only be like 6 months or a year for him on the other side. The experience of time is very different on the other side. And I had this is my first book. In this book, there's a story. This is the Overcoming the Fear of Death book. In this book, there's a story about a friend of mine, and it's the if you have this book, I'll just tell you, you can write this down. The section, it's called "No Smoking in Heaven." It's it's kind of an odd title, right? And yeah, exactly. And it's on page 84 in paperback anyway. There's I do the audiobook narration of this book. There's an audiobook, there's a paperback and an ebook. Anyway, it's on page 84 in the paperback version. Bottom line is, one of the things that he asked me to tell his sister, he's on the other side, this is a friend of mine's brother, is that he meant to get to her as soon as possible. And this was the soonest he could get to her. She found a suicide note from him. Obviously, afterwards, after he had taken his life by suicide. She had not shared that note with me. I didn't know about the note until after he visited me and gave me this message to her. That wasn't the message. That's part of the message, but there's other parts of the message. Anyway, bottom line is that's the part of the message that's relevant to what we're talking about with Denise right now. Bottom line is that it was 16 years, Earth years. 16 Earth years. And he had, in his suicide note, she found it in a box. She had thought she had thrown it away 16 years earlier because she was so upset, obviously, that he took his life. They were very close, brother and sister. And she thought she'd thrown it away. She found it in a box. She was looking for something else, and it was in her closet. She found it. Anyway, she screenshot it and took a 5-page handwritten note to her. And she sent it to me. She said, look at page 3 and look at the middle of page 3. And he talked about how he was going to communicate with her. He promised to communicate with her as soon as he could. 16 years later, Earth years. So that's what one of the many things that has led me to believe that the experience of time is very, very different on the other side than it is here. So my point, Denise, though, is you could be planting seeds in his head, right? Wait for me. Don't go back yet. Right? We still have influence with people. That's what we do. We're influencing people's minds, right? You can still converse with him and try to influence him. If he listens to you or not listens to you, Denise, that's up to him, right? Just like it was when he was here, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we all have our own mind to make up our own decisions about it, but try to influence them. Talk to them. Okay. Now, what about the soul purpose? And you talk about losing it after birth. I want to talk about this. Use that phrase because it kind of goes to this other thing that Anne-Marie was talking about, forgetting and so forth. So does everybody have a soul purpose when they come in? Some people do, as I said earlier, some people don't. And some people can change their soul purpose. So let's talk about some nuances to this idea, where you can come in with a soul purpose and you can change it while you're here. Not only can you change it, but other people can influence your soul purpose and make it not work, can make it change, because you don't have control over everybody else's mind, right?
Right.
Like, what if Denise, you and I decide to come back and hang out in our next lifetimes, and we're hanging on the other side. Hey, Denise, let's hang out, whatever, and And we plan it out, Denise. We plan it on the other side. And we say, and we're on the other side. And I've had this memory of this experience of where I looked down and I saw a family. And what if we are on the other side, Denise? Because we can do this, and you can look down and you say, hey, look at that family over there, Denise. Hey, these families, they live in the same town and they're already friends. So let's go down and you go into that family, Denise. I'm going to go into this family. Okay. And we do. Now it's another 9 months though, Denise, before we get right, because we're in utero, right? Now we're like, okay, our soul's in there, and we're like, okay, and I go, well, we're tapping our feet, we're in the womb, like, okay, let's get this going here. We want to hang out. And during that period of time, or maybe it's after birth, it doesn't matter when it happens, it doesn't have to be like immediate, but it could be a year or 2 or 3 years later, your father's boss's boss's boss decides that the company's moving to a different state, and you're going with them, and our soul plan's messed up because it has nothing to do with you or me changing our minds. But it has nothing to do with your father changing his mind either. It has to do with his boss's boss changes his mind or her mind, and now the company's moved, right? Now, here goes to the point we talked about earlier about expanding the conscious capacity of our minds. Here's another value of that, is that your mind gets stronger. So Denise, because you and I have been meditating in a previous lifetime, and we're still kind of in that mode in our next lifetime, Denise, our minds are stronger than they used to be in 5 or 500 previous lifetimes. We're much stronger now, okay? Because we're meditating, expanding our conscious capacity, and we can still make that happen. Even though now you're in Kansas and I'm in Massachusetts, and our souls are still connecting and still trying to work out the soul plan that's now been derailed by the boss of your father. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. Thank you.
Yeah. So,
I just gotta throw a side note out that you're in did you just say you're in Massachusetts?
Yeah, I grew up in Boston. Yeah.
Ah, okay. My biological family that I had just recently met not too long ago, they were all in the Boston area. So I just thought it was kind of funny.
That's funny. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now, back to your son, Denise, who's on the other side.
Yes.
Let's say that he comes down the chute, so to speak. Sometimes people refer to it as like they come into another family, right? Before
Mhm.
you die and you're on the other side. Can you, because of what I'm teaching you, and because you're meditating now and strengthening your mind, could you then connect and either go down into the same family that he's already in, or a related family, and be his friend in another lifetime and still have a relationship with him, even though he beats you down to earth again? Yes.
I would hope so.
It's all about the bottom line point is 2 things: choice, if you want to do that, right? And strengthening our mind. The stronger our mind is, the more effective we are at manifesting the choices that we want to have. The desire, it's kind of desires we have. You have a desire to be with your son. That's a desire. That's a wish. The more powerful your mind is, the more effective you're going to be at aligning your desire, your thoughts, and your actions to make that desire fulfilled. Right? That's the
Right.
formula. Very practical. Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Like, sorry, I couldn't wrap my head around it, so I had to ask.
No, this is a really good question. It's a really good question. There's a lot of learning and lessons in that question. No, it was a great question. No, I understood what you meant.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
It
Well,
looks
are we done? Are we cooked? Hour and a half?
I have a few more questions if you
I
want.
can keep going as long as you want, but
Yes,
just
we know this.
I got my glass of water. I'm good. Go ahead.
Jen, did you want to ask your question or do you want me to ask it? Because that's a really good question about reconciliation. We hear this a lot from mediums. Can't
Yeah.
contact them. They're in reconciliation. Okay, so
Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, if you're just the unresolved or those relationships that didn't have that weren't healthy or whatever, or toxic, or perhaps like my birth mother who's already predeceased me. That's not really what I'm talking about. I guess I think about my mom and her mom that had such horrible relationship. Is there a chance, can you choose to reconcile on the other side, or can you choose to not reconcile on the other side? I guess, is there a choice?
Absolutely. There's always choice. That's one of the few always is there's always choice. Each mind always has its individual choice because my experience is that each mind or soul is sovereign. It's a unique entity in and of itself. And they can either choose to reconcile or not. They don't have to. Nobody's making them. And why would they choose to do it or not do it? They would choose to do it or not do it because they think that it's going to make them happier. They think it's either going to make them happy to reconcile, or they think it's going to make them less unhappy, in other words, happier, to engage with each other and try to reconcile. Either way, it's a happiness quotient. That's what's driving people is their, or sometimes people will use the phrase self-interest. They have a self-interest, not selfish, difference, not the same as selfish, but they have a self-interest in promoting their own happiness. And so I'm not saying they compute this out. I'm distilling it down to kind of principles, and it's not always clear cut either, right? It's sometimes gray. Like, should I reconcile or not reconcile? Well, if I do, then this will happen. If I don't, then it's a lot of going back and forth sometimes too. But yeah, it's always their choice. Yeah. But what was the thing that Anne Marie you were mentioning?
the process of reconciliation or life review. We hear this a lot from mediums sometimes. They'll say, the soul is in reconciliation. They're in their life review. And this is something that they have to do. We hear this.
Mediums will say stuff like that. And when you hear this stuff they have to do, they don't have to do anything. Some people have a life review. Some people don't have a life review. Some mediums are kind of like school marms. They have that mentality. And I mean this lovingly. I don't mean this in I'm not like throwing water on them, but their personality type, in other words. It's like they like to wag finger, it's like the finger wagging. That's the school marm has a finger wagging aspect of their personality. It's like, nah, 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 nah. Like, no, you got to do your life review. You're stuck there until you're done with your life review. Now you can go. No. You can do a life review if you want to. And life review is not necessarily only about reconciliation. Can it sometimes be about reconciliation? Yes. So it's, again, that's the absolutism stuff that the school marm wants to kind of promote, because the school marm is a rules and regulations type personality. There's got to be rules, and there's certain rules that you got to follow. If you don't follow these rules, that's the no. Do most people follow the rules that the school marm is saying? If you've ever been in school, in elementary school, with a school marm type school teacher, yeah, most people do, because they don't want to get their knuckles cracked with the ruler, or or whatever, or just embarrassed by the 69-year-old school marm who's probably should have retired 4, 5, 6 years earlier, but they're still there, wagging the finger. I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's toes now who's still teaching at 70 years old, but whatever. It's like that kind of person gets off on ordering people around to what to do. And that person is very powerful when they're dealing with 5 and 6 and 7 and 8-year-old children. They are, right? They just are. I mean, I grew up, I'm 73 years old now. And I grew up, and you talk to a lot of my friends who went to St. Catherine's Catholic Elementary School in Norwood, Massachusetts, and they can't remember the name of the sister, but it's Sister so-and-so. They all know it's Sister so-and-so. And she was 150 years old, and she was like that. And she literally whacked knuckles. This was back when you could do that. You can't do that anymore. But, you know, it was a thing that she did. And I have tons of high school classmates of mine who have all kinds of stories. Well, that kind of person dies and they're on the other side. And now the medium is now connecting with Sister so-and-so from St. Catherine's in Norwood, Massachusetts, who died in like 1969. Right? Whatever. And so now she's connecting through to mediums and telling them all this stuff. But life review is kind of more like my experience with life reviews. It's like going through your iPhone photo library, and it's just like flipping through, like, or seeing the version that's got the 1,000 pictures, all that are like this big. But you can see them. It's like that's what the life review is like. It's not necessarily all the bad stuff, and it's not all the good stuff. It's all the stuff. And it's like, and you can flip through and you can pause and you can look, oh yeah, oh, that person, oh, really, man, I broke up with that girl, and when I was 18 and a half years old at Dartmouth College, is a true story, and on the phone, and it was like, I was such a jerk to do that, I do it like on the phone, really, anyway, so, I may have some still like stuff that I feel like I need to reconcile with that person. So, yeah, but not always for everybody all the time. That's a thing, right?
Yep, makes that. Okay, 2 more. Rangina, do you want to ask your question? If not, I will. She said, oh, there she is.
She's here. Gotta unmute.
She unmuted, but I guess not. Okay.
No.
She says, my husband and I try to volunteer a lot in our son's memory. His eternal peace and happiness is what motivates us to do this. Do you think he will know, and what we are doing in his memory has any influence towards him still?
Absolutely, he knows. Yeah, I mean, our loved ones are very aware of what we're doing, whether they let you know or not, or whether they're trying to let you know, and whether you can hear them or not. They could be trying to let you know, and it's not getting through. So either way, doesn't matter. But yeah, they're very well aware. And sure, it's going to influence him in some way. It's going to definitely emotionally affect him, I would think, in a positive way. Definitely. Yeah.
And Vidya, do you want to ask your question? Oh, you're muted.
I gotta get.
There you go.
I just want to know, like, you know how they say we all have our guides with us? So
Yeah.
when my daughter transitioned, they always say, oh, her guide came into her and went. That's what they say. I want to really find out if she's still with the guides when they go up onto the other side across the veil. Do the guides still stay with them, or is it since they've seen their family, the guides just let them go with the rest of the family? I'm
You're
not sure
talking about her guides. That's what you're saying?
Yes, her guides. Yes, her guides. Like,
Yeah.
I have my guides, and she must have had her guides when she was here. So will
Yeah.
the same guides continue to go with her across once she transitioned, and will they be the ones teaching
Yeah.
her everything?
The short answer is yes. They're guides. They're not guides just when we're here on planet Earth. They're guides wherever we are. It's more like, think of the guides as more like your friends. It's like, do your friends abandon you? No, especially your spiritual friends, because the guides are spiritual guides, right? I mean, they're spiritual in the sense that they're not in a biological form, is what I'm saying. And so obviously, now that she's not in a biological form, she's on the other side, but she's like they are. in the same form, energy form, like they are. But the relationship is there regardless, biological or not, right? So the fact that she's on the other side, she's no longer here, doesn't mean you're like, oh, my job's over. You know, it's not a job, it's a relationship. It's a relationship, right? And so, can she say to them sometimes like, hey, you know, I don't need you hanging around anymore. Yeah, that's a choice. She could tell them to go take a vacation or whatever. But it's a relationship. It's like you could say that to your friends. It's like, you know, you're hanging out with your friends, and do you sometimes tell your friends to go home, you know, whatever. It's very similar to that. It's a relationship that they have, but their relationship with her, just like your relationship with your guides, everybody has guides and friends and so forth, is is an ongoing thing that's occurs because of the relationship that you have. And you know, I have guides. I mean, you could call them guides. I mean, I have friends who I've been involved with. I have thousands of them who kind of hang out and come and go and so forth and so on. So I think that's true for all of us. Most of us are just unaware of it. Yeah. But yeah, she's not alone, if that's what you mean. She has plenty of help, if you want to refer to her guides as that in that way. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah.
Does anybody else have a question for Kelvin? Are we questioned out? Are we good?
Anything else? Yeah.
Carmen, did you have a question or no? There she is.
There. I just, now, when we come back,
Uh-huh.
the things that we feared before or felt, do we have those same fears? And
The short answer is yes.
yes.
And to what degree they manifest will vary, you know, obviously, and how they will manifest will vary depending on circumstances and all kinds of choices that you make in life, et cetera, et cetera. Like, I mean, I just popped to mind, like, if you have a fear of being in the ocean and you live in the Sahara Desert or something, you choose to come back and live, you're probably not going to have that fear manifest in a way that you did in a previous life where you lived in California near the Pacific Ocean. But it'll still be a fear that you carry around within you that will be, if you don't understand how these things can transfer from life to life, it'll be inexplicable. It's like, why do I have that fear? You know, this makes no sense. I live in the Sahara Desert, you know, whatever, you know, but it's a vestige of some old something that you're carrying around. So yeah. And so that's why, and the reason we carry our fears with us, because we take our mind with us. We take our mind, our mind, our consciousness includes all of our past experiences and impressions and therefore fears and so forth that have left impressions in our consciousness. And we take all that with us to the other side, and then we take it back here if we come back, if we choose to come back again. So that's why I'm all about helping people reduce their fears, whether it's about death and dying, or fears about flying, or fears about anything. I have one of my students, she didn't come to me through fears about death and dying issues. She came to me because she has fears about being in a place that doesn't have a roof. Yeah, so she can be in a car, she can be in a building, she cannot be outside without freaking out. And she's 30 years old, young mother, 2 kids, I think. And she found me online. And so now that fear is gone away. She found herself sitting in her car in the parking lot at work one day, not realizing that she hadn't gone through the same routine ritual of standing inside the building door to the parking lot, trying to get the strength to walk the 50 feet over to where her car was in the parking lot. So, you know, no roof, right? She sent me a picture of a banana peel in her car once, and like, what's this about? She said she ate something in her car because you can't eat in the car. For some reason, she had a fear about eating in the car, so her fear went away about being on, you know, roofless places. But then her fear went away about eating in a car. So now she's not carrying these fears. To your point, Carmen, she's not carrying her fears with her into the afterlife or into her next lifetime in a biological body again. She's going to be able to eat in cars. She's going to be able to walk outside without these fears, which, you know, most of us are going, really? Yeah, 30 years old. Okay. So that's why I help people get rid of their fears, because you're taking your mind with you. It's all about who are we now in the present? Doesn't matter what our past lives are. Doesn't matter what we want to have happen in the future. We're living in the present all the time. So what can we do to reduce our fears, expand our conscious capacity of our mind, reduce our fears now so that we don't take them with us?
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So our fears spontaneously dissipate through meditating and expanding?
Yeah, because when we are first biologically, if we're in a biological body, which we all are here, we change our chemistry and our cortisol and adrenaline and lactic acid, and there's 40 to 60 other hormones and chemicals that need to be in balance, right? And they get all out of whack when you have the fight or flight response. So balancing all that stuff biologically is going to affect our mind, okay, and our emotions. And it trains our mind and emotions. So even if we don't have a biological body anymore, the mind and the emotions get trained to be in fight or flight mode, in fear mode, by having it happen so often. So by reducing that chemical imbalance through the meditation, we get rid of our fears that way. By expanding our conscious capacity of our mind, we get rid of our fears also because we feel so much more powerful. Now, the mind is what we're taking with us. So if our mind is more expanded when we go to the other side, we're taking a more expanded mind, a more powerful mind to the other side too. Right.
And I think you addressed this before, but what if the person has Alzheimer's or dementia in this life?
So if they have dementia and Alzheimer's, that goes away because those are very biologically related, right? And so the biologically related stuff that is affecting us mentally and emotionally goes away because you don't have a biological body causing all that stuff anymore. So people who have dementia have clarity of mind once they are biologically dead.
The brain's gone, right?
Brain's gone, all of that chemical brain stuff and so forth, irrelevant on the other side. They have clarity of mind again.
Good to know.
Yeah. Make sense?
Anybody else have another question? We're all good?
Good.
All good?
Great questions. Really good stuff. Good to see everybody. Just a heads up, you can always reach out to me, kelvinchin.org. I have 4 websites, but that website will get you to all the others. kelvinchin.org. You can go to the contact page and you can schedule a time to talk with me privately about anything that I teach. Any of this afterlife stuff, the meditation, so forth. By the way, I never turn anybody away for financial reasons, and never means never. I never turn anybody away for financial reasons. Somebody wants me to teach them anything that I teach them. And there's also free stuff on that website, kelvinchin.org. You'll see. There's a free monthly thing I do on the 30th of every month. You can register for that there. I answer any questions about afterlife, afterlife. It's an open forum about afterlife Q&A stuff. Okay. So you'll
That's
see
awesome.
the number of
And
classes.
then I can post it in the group too, so that they have the website also besides the books.
Yeah, there you go. Good.
Very good. Do you want to unmute and say
Thank you so much.
Can I say one thing though before he goes?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I'm a current or kind of new member to his classes with the meditation and everything. And I just want to say, for someone who overthinks every freaking thing, like when they're meditating and like they question, like, oh my God, I'm supposed to quiet my mind. I'm supposed to be quiet. Like, shut up, shut up, Denise. I told myself all these things. Like, you're supposed to not think anything. But his practices, the way he does things, has been very beneficial for me. And I can't thank him enough, because, like, I always thought I was wrong, and he's helped. He's helped quite a bit, even though it's still new to me. But it's helped more than I thought it would, and I do appreciate you, and I thank you, Kelvin. And he is always there for you if you need him. Like, he is an amazing man, and I just wanted to give him that shout out or whatever. But he is an amazing man.
Thank you, Denise.
Well, thank you.
I'm
I
glad. I'm
think
so
we all
glad.
agree.
I'm so glad it's been helpful for you. Yeah, and it's so much easier than all that other stuff that you were thinking that the meditation was. It's so much easier, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Because
Good.
now I know it's okay, and I didn't think it was okay. And I'm the kind of person that, like I said, overthinks everything and doubts myself and judges myself. And yeah, and your way of teaching, I can actually do it, and I feel better afterwards, and it's amazing. And I never thought it would be like that ever. So
Great.
thank you.
You're very welcome. That's great to hear, Denise. That's great.
Wonderful.
Good. Good.
Once again, thank you, Calvin.
Thank you,
Thank
Calvin.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very
Time,
much.
your wisdom.
Thank you so much.
We
Welcome.
appreciate
Bye.
you.
Good night, all. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good
Good night,
night.
everybody.
Care.